Started, guys. So today, Kyra will take your headphones out. Anyone else got headphones in? Nick doesn't.
No, not today.
No, not today.
Get off me, sir.
Meta, not hiding any headphones under them. All right. So today we're going to talk about two theories of mind. We're going to talk about the most dominant theories of mind. So that word mind, we're going to use that. I'll clarify it more in a moment. But when we talk about mind, we're talking about what is the source of consciousness. Okay? And so the dichotomy we've got today is it's either the brain, okay, or it's something beyond the brain, something that's not material. So when we're talking about mind, we can use the word mind. Some people use the word soul, all right, or some people use the word spirit. We're going to use those to mean the same thing. It's something intangible. You can't touch it. It's something immaterial. It's not made of matter. It's some sort of extra material. It's beyond material. So we're going to be looking at two theories, right? We've got dualism. Dual, all right? That word means two. Okay, dualism, two. Dualism, interactionism. Interactionism is what they used to use in the past, and contemporarily people tend to use dualism. And we're going to compare that with materialism, which is brain identity theory. So we're looking at two theories today. Dualism and materialism. All right, so the definitions of them are going to come up throughout the slides. We'll start with unpacking this difference between matter and mind. So, Angela, can you have a read of the first paragraph for me?
Defined by such properties as length, depth, height, mass, motion, and
Spatial.
location. It is composed of purely physical parts, molecules, atoms, and subatomic particles, and governed entirely by the causal process enshrined in the laws of physics. The body and the vast physical universe of which it is part are best thought of through the model of a machine, their operations being as mechanically automated as those of a watch, and their elements as frequently as a watch's gears and mainspring.
Very good. Okay, so that's what we mean by material things. All right, and we can understand all of that, right? It's subject to causal processes. It's physical stuff, it's tangible stuff you can touch. Okay, and then we're going to contrast that with the mind. So Nick, can you read that one for me?
The mind, by contrast, is essentially a thinking thing, void of shape, mass, location, space, or any other physical property, and governed by reason rather than mechanical causation. This is utterly distinct from its associated human body as it is from the material world in general, that doesn't interact with it.
Right, so it's saying the mind, not a material thing. It's some sort of extra material. It's beyond the material, some sort of spiritual thing. So hence the mind, soul, spirit. Okay, so dualism, like its name suggests, okay, dual, two parts. It says, for you as a human being, you've got two components. You've got a physical body, a machine, and inside the machine you've got this spiritual mind, this ghost inside the machine that causes the actions. Okay, that's the epicenter of reason, the central point that allows you to act. That's what dualism. Dualism, you've got two parts, material body and spiritual mind. Okay? That's what dualism's saying. Materialism, on the other hand, says there's not two substances, there's not two things, there's only one thing, just a material body. And that mind is just the brain. Okay? That mind and the brain are the same thing. Alright? So there's the two differences. Dualism, there's mind, there's a spiritual mind and a material body. Materialism, there's just material. Any thought you have is just material. Very good. So that's the distinction between them. So we're going to look at, firstly, some arguments for dualism. We've got some problems with dualism, and then we'll look at some arguments for materialism, and we've got some problems with materialism as well. So firstly, we've got, for two things to be the same, okay, this is the identical principle, for two things to be the exact same, these are the properties they need to have. They need to have exactly the same properties, all right? They have to be exactly the same. Let's see. My brain can be cut in half. You can remove it from my head and cut it in half, and you'll still have two parts of it remaining. Two parts that continue to exist. Alright, you can do that, right? Third premise. But my mind cannot be cut in half. Okay? If you take my brain out and you cut it in half, I don't now have two minds that continue to exist. My mind has stopped existing. Alright? So the conclusion there, my brain is not my mind. Alright. So let's think about the first definition. It's saying for two things to be the same, they must have the same properties. And it's saying my brain, the physical thing, that physical jelly mush inside my head, does not have the same properties as my mind, because we can cut my brain in half and it continues to exist, but we can't cut my mind in half. Alright. Any issues with this kind of argument?
So from the materialist perspective, the mind is the brain.
Correct.
So therefore you can cut it in half, because you just have to cut the brain in half.
Right.
And you were saying like, you can cut your brain in half and have two separate things, and they still exist separately. I had an idea here, but it's a scary.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're absolutely right. Like the two physical things continue to exist, but if you cut someone's brain in half, all right, then they're going to be dead. They can't function. There is no mind there, is there? So the mind doesn't continue to exist. Harry?
What if the brain is not the mind, but the mind is contained inside the brain?
Yep.
So, like, if I can cut a jar full of something in half, and I'll have these two halves of the jar. But say air's in the jar, I can't cut air in half. But when this jar is full and closed, it contains air.
Very good. Yep, that's a good critique. So maybe you can phrase it like this. Think of a car engine, okay? It functions, the car functions, all right? It works. If you cut the car in half, say you've got a lightsaber, and just cut the car in half, you've still got the two parts that exist, but the function of the car, it no longer works, does it? Okay, so that's a good critique of this argument, to say, just because we have the parts, the whole together, the whole ensemble, the collection of parts, is more than just the individual parts. It has more purpose, more function, more capacity. Cool, all right, so that's the divisibility argument. It is a pretty weak argument. This is one, Nick? This is one Descartes came up with about 500 years ago. Okay, let's move on to the knowledge argument. Okay, we're starting with the same premise, all right, which is talking about identity. The two things to be the same, they have to have the same properties. All statements that are true for one must also be true for the other. That's what's going to make things identical. All right, statements have to be true for one and they're going to be true for the other. I can know with certainty that my mind exists. All right, that's Descartes. I think, therefore I am. I know, my mind exists. But I can't know that my brain, that physical thing inside my head exists, because maybe I'm in the matrix. Maybe I'm a simulated being, I'm a digital consciousness. Maybe I'm a brain in the back. All right. So you can't know for certain that your brain exists, but you can know that this consciousness exists, because you know that you are conscious. And so therefore, because they don't have the same properties, it's saying there's a difference between them. Okay? How about this argument? Kim?
I think there relies on an underlying premise that the brain doesn't have to function for you to exist. Because if the brain has to function for you to exist, then you can know with certainty that the brain exists, even if you were in, say, a simulation, or if you were in some other sort of scenario like that. Like we can, for example, the brain in the jar would work. Because the brain has to exist for that to work, right? But if your brain has to work for you to exist, for you to still keep living, then therefore the brain must exist.
Very good. So it's begging the question. It's assuming that you can have the mind without the brain.
Yeah.
Yep. Cool. So there's an argument I will go through with Year 12s after this. It's about conceivability, but for now we'll keep it a bit simpler. So that's the conceivability argument. I'll talk to that about you guys in a moment. Okay, so that's dualism, right? Dualism says there's two substances, there's a material body and a spiritual mind. All right? But we have a gaping problem in this. You've got a nice cold beer there. All right? You can drink alcohol, a physical material substance, and it has an effect on your mind, on your immaterial mind. All right? You can slam your hand in a car door. All right? A physical process that has a qualitative impact in your mind. So the interaction problem, this is the core problem with dualism, says how can think of causation. Like, think back to the Kalam argument. We said every event has a cause, right? And we can trace it like this: hand in the door, slammed, ouch. The neurons firing back to the brain. How do these dominoes that are following, these causal events, affect this spiritual domino, this immaterial domino? Similarly, if your mind is a spiritual mind, how does a spiritual or a soul or an immaterial charge domino cause the physical body to move? How do these things interact with one another? Okay, so that's the interaction problem. All right, cool. Interaction problem. So then let's look at materialism. So we're going to look at two arguments here. The first one is just the argument from Occam's razor. Who can remember what Occam's razor is? Campbell first.
Isn't that like the simple explanation teaching development?
Excellent. The simplest explanation, the one with the least amount of assumptions. Okay? And if we look here at the difference between them, here we're positing two entities. We're positing a material thing and a spiritual thing. Alright? Material being and a spiritual being. Two things. Whereas when we look at materialism, we're just positing one. There's only one thing. It's just matter. It's just physical stuff. So that's like a pretty compelling argument. Like, let's simplify it. Let's make it as simple as we need to. So, thanks, Nick. Nick, thank you. Let's have a read of the second argument. The brain is identical to the mind. The brain is made of atoms. Therefore, the mind is made of atoms. This is an assertion, right? It's just making the claim, because the brain is made of atoms, so is the mind. Okay, let's look at, we've got the problem, though, with just materialism. This is the core problem of materialism. How can, if you think, if your brain and your mind are the same, that means your mind, every experience you have, every thought, every belief, every sensation is just an arrangement of atoms in the brain. How can, and it might be that they're arranged like this, it might be that they're arranged like that. So the question is, how can an arrangement of atoms be good? All right, we describe people as good, or having good intentions, or doing good things. All right, how can an arrangement of atoms be true? What does it mean to say something is true if all that is inside your brain is a collection of atoms? How can an arrangement of atoms be loving? How can they deliberate? How can an arrangement of atoms deliberate and think about things and arrive at a conclusion? How can an arrangement of atoms make choices? And how can an arrangement of atoms feel? I'm just going to show this. Generally, when we talk about the hard problem of consciousness, hard because it's about matter, right? How can hard things interact? What people generally talk about in terms of feeling. How can we feel things? How can a bunch of atoms know what a banana tastes like? Know what it feels like to rub your hand against a velvet cushion? I'll go to the next slide. All right. Amanda, can you read that one for me?
The hard problem of consciousness is the problem of explaining how and why the sentient organism have equal or phenomenal experiences, how and why it is that some internal states are felt states, such as heat or pain, other than unfelt states, as in a thermostat or a hot water.
Excellent. So it's like, why do we have, under materialism, what's the purpose of consciousness and awareness if it's unnecessary? Completely unnecessary. Just as a hot water system detects when the water temperature is too low and it needs to turn on, it's like a thermostat, right? It measures the temperature. It's not that it feels that it's hot or too cold, it's just measuring the molecular fluctuations of the water and says, right, there's not enough fluctuations, I need to activate it. It's not that it even has that thought. It's a thermometer or a hot water system is not a thinking thing. Thought is unnecessary, yet it's tacked on it. How can a material thing have any sensations whatsoever? All right? So that's the hard problem of consciousness. I might talk about that one a bit later with the Year 12s. So that brings us to the end, right? Two competing theories of mind. Dualism, like its name suggests. There's two substances in each human person. There's a material component, the body, and then there's a spiritual being inside that causes its actions. All right? But when we process that, we arrive at things such as the interaction problem. How does this spiritual thing, spiritual substance, interact with this material world? Okay? So we've got problems there. Then have a look at materialism. All right? It's much simpler just to posit that your brain and mind are the same thing. They're just physical matter. But what's the utility of consciousness? How can an arrangement of atoms be true or good or feel something? How can an arrangement of atoms have an experience? It's just a collection of Lego blocks. You don't expect to arrange your Lego blocks into a tower and the tower has an experience. Harry?
Another thing, how would an arrangement of atoms contain memory?
Memory, perfect, yep. Good question, yep. So, both of them have gaping problems, don't they? But these are the two dominant theories of mind in philosophy at the moment. Very good. So that's all I want to talk about. I'd love to come around and have a chat to you about it. I've got 4 questions I'd like us to have a go at answering in our journal, and we can spend some time working on our folio task following that.
It's tomatoes.